Hello everyone and welcome to session number 6 of this Holy Week conference. I'm so excited to see you all, and also I have a question for you today. I want to know what has impacted you the most through this conference. Let me know down in the comments below. I'm so excited to read them. And today we have an amazing panel lined up for you. We have a panel of pastors from around Scotland, from our very own Outreach Community Church Straven. We have Pastor Roddy Gillis. We also have from Living Waters Church Bells Hill, Pastor Michael Cochran, as well as the co-senior pastors from UIC Eldersley, Sean Wilcock and Jason Reed. So I'm so excited to hear what these men have to say. But first, we have another worship set from the Presence Ministry worship band. So let's get ourselves centered and ready, and I'm going to hand you over to the worship band.
I tried so hard to see it, took me so long to believe it, that you chose someone like me to carry your victory. Perfection could never earn it. You give what we don't deserve, and you take all the broken things and raise them to glory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won, I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. Now I can finally see it. You're teaching me how to receive it. So let thank you for breaking the bread of your body and spilling the wine of your blood. Thank you, oh, my heart will sing forever. Thank you for breaking the bread of your body, spilling the wine of your blood. Thank you, oh, my heart will sing forever. Thank you for breaking the bread of your body, spilling the wine of your blood. Thank you, oh, my heart will sing forever. Oh, thank you for breaking the bread of your body, spilling the wine of your blood. Thank you, oh, my heart will sing forever. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all.
Hey, welcome to this session of Presence Ministries Scotland Easter Conference. We thought it would be really interesting in a whole week of conference just to mix it up a little bit and have a couple of sessions that were panel sessions. So for this session, we've pulled in some dynamic, incredible church leaders, and we're just going to. Sorry, guys, no pressure. We're just going to kind of pluck a couple of topics out of the conference week that some of the speakers have been speaking about, and just open it up for discussion, ask a couple of relevant questions, and hopefully out of that discussion we'll be able to bring some sense out of what's been happening, not in the world, but in the church world, because obviously the church world has been affected as much as the real world in that sense with the COVID and the pandemic. And so as we transition through the pandemic and hopefully coming out of lockdown, hopefully for the last time, the church has to look inward and say, well, you know, we've made this journey. What have we learned in this journey? And a couple of things that kind of struck me of what we would call tenets of the faith are a couple of subjects that I just want to kind of open up for discussion tonight. The term servanthood tends to be not a very popular term in modern church theology or teaching sometimes. I remember way back in the 80s, in the good old days, as a young, exuberant youth leader, taking a group of people through a book by Charles Swindoll called Improve Yourself. And it was all based on principles from the Bible about being good servants and be good followers of the example of Jesus. But one of the questions I wanted to ask tonight was, How has the church managed servanthood, do you think, through this really difficult period, when we've not been allowed to meet face to face? How do you think we view servanthood in terms of where we're going with this and how we're going to, how do we set a practical example of what servanthood looks like in 2021? Don't rush.
I'll jump in there then, because I suspect we might have different answers to this topic, simply because we've got different, well, we belong to different churches, and we spoke about this the other night. In fact, one of the most important things when it comes to teaching servanthood is getting out of people's way. Let me expand on that a little bit. I was guilty of, in one of the previous churches that I was in the leadership team, of trying to kind of micromanage so much church activity. Not because I was trying to be the most spiritual person in the building, just because I thought I trusted myself more than others to get the job done. And it wasn't until I kind of burnt out and made space that I suddenly realised there was people in the building that were more qualified than I to do the stuff that I was already doing. But they just stood back, because the more you do, the less people are apt to,
Well, they'll let you do
to step up. And in fact, so like I say, there was a lot of the ministry stuff that I was involved with, and I'm talking practical stuff like visiting the sick and hospital stuff and picking folk up and putting tea bags in an urn and all that kind of stuff. I did it all thinking, nobody's going to want to do this stuff. And when I get out of their way, unintentionally, I was gubbed. That's a good Scottish word for you there. But I was at the point when I just burnt out, and I was exhausted, and suddenly servanthood became natural to many people in the building. They started filling all the holes, all the ministry holes that I'd left behind, because I was so busy, rather than doing what I'd been actually called to do, which was be a leader, and obviously be an example, but lead the church. Then it was incredible. It was how people stepped up to the plate and started to serve in ways that I never thought they could, and far more ably than I ever did. So for me, and like I say, that is just my take on getting out of people's way a lot of the time. They'll learn by your example, obviously. But then a lot of the time there are people in the building who are better able to do the things that you think you cannot lay down. So that's my experience, but I'm guessing for others it might be.
Yeah. I think, again, I've been pastor in church there for 26 years or so, and there's a lot of things you do as a leader. You touch all the areas. However, for me, very kind of early in the ministry, probably within the first 5 years, I'm saying early 5 years, sounds like early, but when you've been there for nearly 30 years, 5 years isn't a long time. But I really try to teach and model the church to care for itself. In a sense, so is that, if somebody has a need, you don't need to call the pastor, call your friend. You know what I mean? If there's an issue going on somewhere, I'm the last person you want to call. Unless you're dying, then phone me. Even when it came to hospital visits, other people can do that. I'll come and see you, but I won't be there every day, So trying to let the church become healthy and realise that that's the body. It needs to do it, because we do live in a society that's consumer driven. Everybody wants everybody to meet their needs, and it's like, well, where's my needs? Everybody in church circles, people feel like, well, my needs not been met. Somebody ignored me. I've never had a phone call. I've not been to church for 3 weeks. I'm saying, well, you should be phoning me if there's something wrong with you for not being at church for 3 weeks. Rather than me phoning to find out what's wrong with you. Because if you're sick, the Bible says, call upon the elders. And you see the pattern in the early church when they were growing, and there was, it became too much a demand upon the apostles who were doing everything. Then they appointed people, and it's incredible. The people they appointed were incredible people. Stephen, Philip, folks who clearly were capable men. And the thing was, they were anointed by God, and the Holy Spirit was in them, and they were men full of power. And it just released the leaders to carry on doing what they were doing. So that whole kind of model and the teaching of it, obviously people have to work it out in their life, but in church, I'm kind of known for if something needs done, the likelihood is, I'll give you an example. One of the guys said to me one day, we had a wee cafe going, and somebody said, Michael, do you not think it'd be a good idea to put a wee sign outside, make a wee sign up and put it outside so that people who are passing can come in? I went, that's an absolutely brilliant idea. And he looked at me and he went, well, who's going to make the sign? I went, well, who's going to make the sign? And he went, me? I says, absolutely. And this happened twice with that same person. And he said, never again am I going to come to Michael when I see a need, because it's going to backfire. And because people are capable, but they don't always know they are,
Yeah, for me, one of the biggest things, and you mentioned at the start that how the world perceives, obviously, this idea of servanthood. And we can do practical examples, but there has to be that teaching that has to follow through on that, or even be, part of that up front, and trying to break down these preconceived ideas of what it means to be a servant. If we can break that down, and rather than this like oppressive view where we're trying to control something, we see that, as a servant, we carry out the commands. It's an empowering thing for us. And to realize that, and when you start to put that in a biblical context, that it's actually the empowering of the believers and the individuals, which links into what you're talking about in terms of, it's not one person, it's the collective. Yeah. And when we start to empower the collective to be the church, and we start to sow into that as a culture within the church, to me, from the beginning, that if we can do that as a church from the beginning, sowing that culture, when someone walks in the door, we have this idea that you've got something of value that needs to contribute, whether that be making a sign or in whatever area. You've got something that God's put on your life, and we want to see that flourish in this. And as you build that understanding and then start to link that to practical elements, to me, that's when it starts to come alive.
So in terms of not just teaching on servanthood, but demonstrating servanthood, what do you think the important aspects are then to impart to people, to be able to empower them? Because servanthood is a term that is, as I said earlier, it's not a particularly popular term anywhere, because it gives that idea of wrongly, but it gives that idea, and especially, I would say, in certain parts of the world, it has a negative connotation to be a servant, to be seen as a servant. But obviously, Jesus was the ultimate servant. We refer to him as a servant king. But what are the aspects of servanthood you think that are important to impart to people so that it changes their perception of what the world might think of servanthood?
I think it's got to start with the who.
With the who. With the who.
Who we're serving. Yeah. Everything has to come from that place, who we're serving. And as we start to, build that revelation in people's lives of, pointing them towards Jesus and saying, he is our example, he is what we're following, and we start to build that who into it, and we take people on that journey. But, who's the start of it? Then it comes into the individual identity, and there's a responsibility on the leaders to nurture and grow the gifts and talents and recognize that in individuals, and start to build that in individuals' lives and help them realize that, they're entrusted with something, and the value of what they're entrusted, the eternal value of what they're entrusted with. If we start to build those things as foundational aspects, to me, you can only flourish moving forward.
Yeah.
I mean, well, ultimately, leadership is servanthood. And so when you talk about important aspects, as leaders, if we have a certain level of humility in the way that we lead, I think that transmits not only your church folk, but to your community. And I often find that the most humble leaders are the ones that are best accepted, and not just amongst their people, but amongst. And so humility is huge for me, and that's something that's learnt. It's not a God-given thing, Yeah. And as leaders, we can be apt, present company excluded, of course. But we can be apt to.
Thanks, Jason.
It can often become about us.
Yeah.
And we always speak about keeping the main thing.
Yeah.
And so I you know, I'm a huge advocate of just of being the least of these, and that then allows folk to flourish. What I found, and often when it came to servanthood, was that when you spoke about empowerment, the more space you leave for them to flourish in, the more confident they become. And so when I was talking about ministry spaces that people began to fill when I was unable for a time, so they went from like tea makers to being handshakers and welcome team and worship teams. And so they actually, you know, and so just we empower them by getting out their way. And that's what I was trying to say. And so humility is a huge thing for me when it comes to.
I love that terminology because I think one of the misconceptions in church society and the corporate gathering of church is that there's almost this preset mentality that somebody else will do it. Well, who is that somebody else? You know, that somebody else isn't really any different from you. And so it's how do we impart that sense of invitation without putting pressure on people to serve in various capacities throughout the church. And I love that terminology of empowering, because empowering is the thing that lets us step back, lets us get out of the way, and other people take up whatever task or jobs that are needing done. And it's not all, and you know, obviously we'd all agree, it's not always non-spiritual roles. It's not just about getting somebody to clean the toilets because you don't like doing it anymore. I mean, the same servant heart that will clean the toilets is the same servant heart that will visit people in hospital, that will sit all night in prayer vigils, that will be there to help people, you know, do spiritual things as well as practical things. So that whole sense of empowerment is really, really a powerful word, because it allows people to, as you say, sometimes step into their gifting that is far superior to us who are trying to bridge the gaps. You know, when you plant churches and you start churches, you seem to be wearing a different hat every hour of the day. But as the church develops and people come alongside and God brings people to you, then the gifting is very diverse of the people that come in. And so actually denying people to serve is something that we're, without realising that we can be guilty of, just by not getting out of the way. Love that. Love that. The other thing, another topic that was really strong in my thinking, because during this whole COVID, and we don't want to make this about COVID, but we can't deny that COVID and the pandemic's had an incredible effect on the church and the way we do church and the way we think about church, not just from the lack of gathering, but what the fallout of that is. And another thing that has really been challenged over the last 12 months is how do we focus on evangelism? How has the church survived 12 months in the field of evangelism? And what lessons have we learned? Is there things that we've gone, do you know what? It's actually given us a slight hiatus where we can step back and look at what we've done, why we do it. Is there things that we've learned specifically to do with the evangelism arm of the church? And what lessons do you think we can learn from this last 10 to 12 months of mixture of lockdown and freedom and lockdown and freedom?
I think there's different flavours of evangelism that's stronger in different churches. I mean, realistically, we would consider ourselves to be quite outreach focused as a local church. However, in fact, pre-COVID, probably for the 12 months pre-COVID, we did try and do something totally different we'd ever done before. One of our team went away, did a whole course, 12 months training, etc. And we adopted some of that, and it was back down to basic street connections, meeting people. You know, we were in the street with big bright t-shirts, free hugs. Can't do that now with COVID, right? You go like that, free hug, and people runs a mile now. But what that did was the free hugs. It broke the ice. We were in the main street and we had a mixture of guys and girls. We had other t-shirts saying, you know, do you need a miracle? You know, with banners up, we were giving out gifts. But it was a great way of connecting with people. I mean, I had a free reign, so we had a few teams, and I would spot people coming and I'd be like to them, hey, it's your lucky day, free hugs, right, you guys, and there'd be hugs taking place. Oh, what's he's doing? We get him a gift, talk to them about why we're here, we're a local church, you know, and within 2 minutes, just really share the love of God in that wee moment. And you know, people broke down and cried in the street. They're saying, oh, this. So for us, pre-COVID, we were in the street connecting with people, and we're only doing it like 3 times a year. But that was the first year. And that's what we're due to do. Our second Easter, COVID came. We had bought all our gear. Everything was ready to go. But it was just that breakdown, because it's not about, I don't know, standing in a street corner, connecting with community. We've did lots of events, Easter egg hunts. We've had thousands of people there. But it's not brought everybody to church. However, we've had great community impact. Everybody in the community knew who the church was. And they would refer to the church, oh, we know that church. Oh, that's ours. So it was, and then when there's a need, the phone call would come, you know what I mean? Or it's a funeral or something like that takes place. Just connection, because everybody's no rushing to get to church. No, they're not fighting with their blankets. It's hard enough to get to church to be at church. Never mind the people who are meant to be there, you know what I mean? But again, this is a time when I think the church just needs to be church. And even through COVID, one of a kind of series of messages I put out there online was, hey, church, we can't gather, but you need to be church where you are. We need to learn to thrive and not just survive, because very often we get into survival mode, just batten down the hatches, nothing's going to happen, church is shut. God's no shut. The kingdom's no shut. The doors may be closed, but the church is very much alive and needs to realize it is very much alive. And maybe a telephone call, maybe you can't go and meet with people, you know, which is a big problem. A telephone call, a text message, something on Facebook, just a connection.
I love that, because one of the things that was in my mind was that because of the debilitating nature of COVID and the restrictions that were put on church and church life, I thought, not everybody's as passionate as you. I'm going to be dead honest. You know, there are lots of church leaders and pastors and ministers and priests up and down the country of the UK that have suffered varying degrees of lockdown, but they don't have the passion for the lost. They don't have the passion for evangelism that you necessarily feel. And one of my concerns is, has COVID as a negative effect taken the passion away? Has it limited the passion, or has it maybe increased the desire? Because, you know, sometimes absence makes the heart grow fonder, and because we've not been able to, should that rebirth a desire in us to get back on the street and to be engaging with people again? What do you think?
For me, obviously, we kind of get boots. The boots in the street thing is difficult, you know, so it's changed in a kind of coordinated corporate sense, evangelism. But I have never felt as hungry to reach people. And because I work in the community, I've never had as much opportunity, because conversations have changed, you know, because the world is a far more vulnerable place. Humanity is far more fallible than it was a year ago. And so conversation's different. It used to be a lot of talk about nothing over a cup of tea in somebody's back door. But I'm having faith conversations now that I could never have had a year ago. So personal evangelism is huge in this. Corporate's been difficult, but finding space for personal has just been phenomenal. I've had some fantastic conversations in the last year, and I work in a predominantly Jewish area. So, you know, the messianic message is a difficult one. But there's almost been like I've recognised breakthrough in conversations with people. Honestly, that they would have laughed at you previously. But now, because they're looking at the world and they're seeing such a vulnerability in the world because of the chaos that's ensued because of this thing. So personal evangelism, and we've promoted that as well. We've told our guys online, say, listen, make sure you're difference makers in the space that you occupy. And so all you can do is encourage them to work in there.
And I mean, I would say the same, you know. I'd say over the last year, I've seen more conversations happen in my community, and just generally in the community, than I have before. People just, you know, they're walking on opposite sides of the streets and they stop to say hello. And that wasn't happening before to some degree. And, you know, for me, everything starts with a simple conversation. Sometimes, you know, people want to rush to the mark or trying to evangelize, but it's the Samaritan woman at the well. It's a simple conversation
Yep.
that allows you to go deeper from there, and we're able to have those. For me, I see a very positive aspect, that can come out of this, and that's also the online side of things. I look at it, and one of the greatest challenges is actually to get people through the threshold into the building. Well, when we're online, we've got this transparency that people can pop in and out. And, if they come in and they hear one thing that breaks down a barrier, I see it as a very positive tool now that we should be using. But coming back to what you said about the lost, if we see church as we can only be effective when we're in the room, we're in a hopeless situation right now. But when we understand that we can be effective, essentially, as the church in the season and through the season,
I think sometimes we can offence God in with our attitude, and we're guilty of it, or how dare they shut churches, but I don't think God's has been or the Holy Spirit has moved as effectively as he has in the last year. In a world that's crying out for hope, we are now the hope carriers. So I think faith. I think I said this to you last time I spoke to you. I think there's going to be a huge turning towards faith in Christ at the end of this, because he's the only sure thing. In a world that we thought we had it nailed down, where we were led by leaders and scientists and experts, suddenly nobody had an answer for something. And that's how the conversations in my life are changing.
I mean, it's the thing is, it's the first time in certainly in my memory, but more than that, in many generations, where one single thing has impacted the whole world. It's not just our community, it's not just our shire, it's not just our country, it's across the world. It's had an impact, and you're right, I've seen conversations happening that you'd never seen, 14 months ago. People that were shut doors are open for conversations. And I think what's interesting is, even in secular life, the number of reconnections have been made through COVID because so many other avenues are closed to us. I mean, when was the last time you saw so many families out walking together? Parents are reconnecting with children, brothers are reconnecting with brothers and sisters, and because our activities have been limited, and so, well, what can we do? And I think that we need to learn lessons from that, and bring them into the church, not the building, but bring them into the church as the people of God, and say, well, if other, if people can converse with each other, then why can't they converse with us about some of the stuff that's important and life changing? And I absolutely agree with you. I'm desperate to break out, because I think there's an incredible harvest out there. And one of the things I've said to my guys more than one occasion when I've been preaching through this is not a hiatus in the church where it's a waiting time. This is a sickle sharpening season. This is where we should be getting prepared for the harvest. So what do you think the tools are then as we round this up? Would you give me an idea of what you think some of the tools would be? Sean mentioned, obviously the digital thing. Expand a bit more on what the tools are. Do you think that we can almost, in a sense, reintroduce evangelism back into the church, because there has been a real lack of ability as the way we understood it. Do we just need to now learn new tools for a new way, or do we need to find the tools that we used to use and were laid aside? My senior pastor, Pastor Andy, has just written a book called Soul Winner, and it's all about personal one-to-one evangelism. It's a time for rebirth of one-to-one evangelism, and one of the phrases he used to use was, "It's time to bring some stuff out of the basement." Some of the old stuff that we've long forgotten, and I'm just wondering if there's some tools in the church that we've neglected to use that now's a season to use them. What do you think?
I think there's a bit of the both the old and the new. Obviously, social media. I mean, we never streamed anything ever, so we've obviously had to hit the ground
Pre-pandemic,
running. And standing in front of a camera was the scariest thing ever. Standing, talking to a wee corner of a room, right, with nobody there, and you can't. It's only one take. That's all it is. But obviously over time, you think, well, I'm not talking to a camera. I'm talking to people who are sitting watching this, and that message, God's words, getting into places that it could never get into before. And then at the same time, then when we started to gather, having to continue streaming because not everybody was coming back to church, but for people who were even visiting online who weren't connected to any church, they could then still go online. In fact, it was brilliant, man. I was getting emails from America, even get some money from America. You know what I mean? Somebody walked in and tuned in. I'm like, oh, this is amazing, man. I can't believe this is happening. But, you know, just a wee town in Scotland somewhere, and yet somebody emails, I tuned into your service today, I loved the breaking of bread, it was fantastic. I'm thinking, oh, that's awful nice. Somebody sends you the encouraging things. However, for me, right in my core has always been one-to-one evangelism. Because that's how I see it. I see it as friendship, breaking into people's lives, into their home, sharing with them, you know, just...
Not literally breaking into their home.
No, breaking into their lives. and absolutely sharing the word of God with them. And I know folks, they're not even that in the door of a church, but you've actually pastored them in the community. You've pastored them in their home. And one day they may turn up to a gathering, you know, somewhere along the line. But for me, it's getting the passion back in people's lives. Because I was saying in today's talk that you know, when somebody either becomes a Christian for the first time, there's always a fire that's in them. They want to share this love with everybody. And after a while, you kind of settle down and become churchy. It's not about settling down and become churchy. Become a bit wild again, you know. Let's get our first love sparked up again. Let's remember what it's all about. You've got something that the world doesn't have. And if you're watching this through this lens and you know Jesus, you've got something the world doesn't have. So give it away. Spread the love. Share the love.
That's the passion.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. We're coming from a different place, Sean and I, because we are unbelievably passionate because this is all new to us. You know, Sean's planted about 3 years ago, but because we're in a brand new village, and it's new to them, because the village we're in, there's been a bit of I don't want to say a passion vacuum, but when it comes to church, but there's been something missing, and so we want to introduce to that village a kind of church that is welcoming, inclusive, and so because of that, we're unbelievably fired up. But then again, we have a responsibility, and this is the one thing we can give our church folk is passion. You know, I mean, obviously there needs to be them going away and working it out and coming back and fired up themselves. But if we transmit, if we are able to, and we've always maintained that every week, we've tried to be as passionate as we can possibly be in a difficult circumstance. And but if we can be that, then we are opening doors to something completely new. See, we use there's a level of preservation with you guys because you're established. We don't have that weight, if you like. We're brand new, and so we are fired up and
Just
ready.
out the wrapper.
We're like the wee cars used to pull back and pull back and pull back and then let them go. And the more you pulled them back or held them back, the further they would go. But we feel as if we've been held back like 4 times in these various lockdowns, and we were ready to. And but then again, it's a lot of responsibility on your part then to kind of for that passion to become evident in your community.
I think, you know, and following on from what you said is we've seen more growth in this season than we have before, which is, you know, coming into COVID, everyone was like, oh, you know, COVID and what's going to happen, the impact. And just seeing how God is working, and it's not in one church, you know, how God is working in and through. And, you know, also I see within the church that you talk about, do we go back to something old, which we were doing previously? There's new elements, and it's both. You know, we need to take stuff that we've learned in this season and carry it into the next season, you know, that we can be more effective. I think the church has been a little bit guilty of lagging behind a lot of the modern day culture. And it's not intentionally, it's just, you know, habit sometimes. But we've had this opportunity now, and a lot of the churches have been forced into an uncomfortable space. Like we said, talking to a camera, that's challenging. But, you know, we're now embracing something that's relevant. And for me, one of the things that's highlighted, we need to make sure that we're raising up the generation behind us.
For sure.
Because they understand what's relevant to what's coming. And a lot of the time as we get older, you know, Jason and I talk about, you know, the challenges of being on things like Zoom and everything. It's tough, but, you know, in the modern world, that's relevant in a lot of spaces. So I think we've got a lot. We shouldn't be going back to anything. We should be taking what we learned and stepping forward.
I think one of the really positive things that's come out of this whole year that we've struggled through is that it's broken that traditional, not traditional church, but that traditionally church mentality of, well, that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Because for a whole year we haven't been able to say that's the way we've always done it. And we've had to innovate and find new ways to reach people, not just new people, but to reach our own church people that were part of the church before this hit. Never mind, reaching more new people. And so I think one of the things that's come out of this is it's created an opportunity that is rarely afforded to the church. It's rarely afforded to business. It's rarely afforded to education places where you've got a break in what is normally week after week after week of the same, to actually say, well, is that what we want to be doing? Is that what we want to go back to? Or has this created a gap to bring in something different, something new, something that we maybe would never have thought of if we hadn't been forced into this position? Because any of you that are still in business or dealing with business will know that one of the things that's going to happen over the next year is major companies are going to reassess expense accounts, because so many of their workers have been working effectively from home. And they've not been jetting off all around the world at the drop of a hat because of technology, because of the ability to have conferencing and all that sort of thing online. And so every aspect of life has been brought under a question mark. And I think it's one of the most exciting times in modern church, because it's given us an opportunity to actually microscope what we're doing and say, well, we've got all these months behind us. What are we going to change? What have we used that time for to identify some of the areas that absolutely we need to continue? But what are some of the stuff we need to do that's new, that's going to be that's going to reach people we wouldn't have otherwise reached? Because you say not everybody's going to walk through the front door of a church. And now, for the first time, for some of us, we've actually reached outside the building. We've actually reached into the big wide world through digital means, through Zoom or through other means. And so I think there's a dawning of a new kind of church.
And what goes with that, which is, to me, just blows me away. We've got the message that we want to carry, and we've got people who are desperate for community.
Yeah.
It's like the greatest opportunity for us to reach into those lives and create, a Jesus-centered community. And what that's all about, and reestablish that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exciting times.
It is. Our reach has never been greater.
Yeah.
So I'm super. That's why I'm saying we're super passionate.
And what you said, you're right. It's not just the reach that's greater. It's the fact that there are more people primed, ready to listen than probably for a long time.
And desperate for community.
And desperate to communicate, and desperate for community, and desperate for that sense of belonging again, and re-establishing bonds and relationships and connections. And that's what the church should be good at. Because our whole ethos is based on relationship with Jesus. And so between servanthood and evangelism, it goes a long way to after coming out as being post-COVID church, to reconnecting the church to the community. Because for so many years, the church has been on the periphery of community. And when Jesus introduced the first century church, it was always meant to be the hub of the community, not somewhere you went to that could be on the outskirts of town, either spiritually or geographically, but everything was meant to revolve around the church. And I think we've got a real opportunity here to bring things back into alignment and make the church a central force in the community.
What it was meant to be.
Yeah.
Because we live in Scotland, particularly Scotland and Ireland. We've kind of grown up, when I say grown up, generations past, traditionally been predominantly either on one side of the fence on religion or on the other. Specifically, even if you look at Lanarkshire, you're either a Catholic, you're a Protestant, you support the Celtic, support the Rangers. If you're watching this internationally, you might not know what I'm talking about here, but it's two major football teams and two classes of communities. So people tend to think the church is a building down the street with a steeple, with the pews, and 3 people go there on a Sunday. But that's not the church that you and I are involved in. That's not the church that Jesus came and died for. He came and died to empower his church, the glorious bride that he's got. And there is places all over, little fires sparking all over to try and represent what Jesus made the church to be. But that's a mindset that has to change. And through COVID and through people going online, they're seeing different church. You know, it's no just the building with the steeple at the end of the street that 3 people go to. You know, they're getting live messages beamed into their home. They're hearing, they're having some hope. You know what I mean? If it's a Zoom meeting, they're seeing other community there. They can go online, like Jason was saying, and view a variety. You know, it's no one size fits all, you know. I've often said to somebody, because people tend to, who I've spoke to, they think, I don't go to church. I've not been for years, you know, weddings, funerals, and christenings and stuff like that. And they forget that I've often said church is like, you go into a supermarket to buy bread, there's a variety. A long time ago, it was plain or pan. You had 2 choices, you know what I mean? But now you've got, and some bread's healthy and some's no healthy. Some's good for you and some's no. And I'm saying that about church life as well, you know? So make sure you pick the good place.
I think that's probably a good note to finish on. So thank you for dropping into this session. Thank you to Jason and Sean and Michael. And it's been really, you know, good to air some of these things, because a lot of times these are the things that churches don't want to talk about, and certainly don't want to talk about publicly. So it's inspiring to hear other church leaders just not air their dirty washing, but be honest and upfront, because you know, it's always the, oh yeah, we're doing fine, yes, everything's great, yes, church is growing, yeah. When actually the reality is that there's other struggles. You know, and it's not always about the number of people that are turning up on a Sunday. You know, church life is so much bigger than a Sunday service. And so to get a chance to just sit and chat to you guys and swap some ideas and just hear where we're coming from and what ultimately what we're excited about. And it's good that we've got 4 people here that are passionate about the things that lie ahead. You know, we're passionate about getting back out there. We're passionate about connecting with communities and with people and introducing them to Jesus. So thanks for being with us, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Tear down the walls, see the world. This is something we have missed. Turn from ourselves, look beyond. There is so much more than this. And I don't need to see it to believe it. I don't need to see it to believe it. 'Cause I can't shake this fire deep inside my heart. Look to the skies, open our eyes, see His majesty revealed. More than this life, there is love, there is hope, and this is real. And I don't need to see it to believe it. I don't see your spirit rising as the lost come out of hiding. Every heart will see this hope we have in you. Oh, for all the sons and daughters who are walking in the darkness, you are calling us to lead them back to you. We will see your spirit rising as the lost come out of hiding, and every heart will see this hope we have in you. Your name is glorious, glorious, and your love is changing us, calling us to worship in spirit and in truth. His whole creation returns. Oh, your name is glorious, glorious, and your love is changing us, calling us to worship in spirit and in truth. His whole creation returns to you. Returns to you. Returns to you. Changing us, calling us to worship in spirit and in truth. Is all creation returns to you.
Awesome. I love seeing a group of pastors being so open and honest about servanthood. I mean, I love the thought about thinking about who we are serving, and also thinking about how we can focus on evangelism and the lessons we've learned, such as taking it back to the basics and just having conversations to connect with people. So thank you, pastors, for depositing that reignition of a passion for servanthood on us through your conversation today. I am so excited to get back out into the world and really take what you have told us and deposit that into other people's lives from this point on. So thank you at home. We hope that today impacted you. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. We are back for another session tomorrow. Remember, if you want to be notified of when we go live, to hit that bell. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the Presence Ministries channel, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a fantastic day.